Welcome to another episode of Jamming with Jason. Hey, today, you know that I like to talk to people who are positively changing the world. And that's what I have with my guest today, Jay Likhoded. Now, you might think, this guy's from compliance. What's compliance doing to change the world? Well, listen to this episode because especially if you're in some of these areas, maybe sometimes you feel like what you do for your day job may not be changing the world or really helping out. But I will tell you it is, and you're going to see more of that as we're talking today. Now, if you're not in compliance, that's fine too, because again, it's going to show you a story of someone who is positively changing the world for better. And it's going to show you maybe some things that you needed to hear today that'll help you be able to change your world. So with that, let's roll that episode. Hey, Jay, I am excited to have you here today. How are you doing?
Hi, Jason. I'm doing great, especially after the last couple of weeks. Yeah.
I know as we were talking before, you had a rough couple of weeks. I know some people have, a lot of people, we've been having a rough couple of years, but it's nice. I'm glad that you're on the mend. Everything is okay now. And it's good to see your smiling face today, and appreciate you because I know you're across the pond over in the UK. So I know it's a little bit later there for you, but appreciate you coming on today to talk. So I wanted to, let's just kind of set the stage a little bit, because I think to me, I'm always fascinated with where people go in their career. Right. And I've kind of seen this in my life and where I've gone too. So I wanted to kind of jump into that with you because, you're the CEO of a compliance tech company, right? And I'll let you kind of introduce yourself to give you that. But then I want to jump back into the story of how you got there, because I think that's amazing to me. So give us kind of the 1 minute introduction on who you are and what you're doing today, and then we'll kind of do a rewind.
Yeah, so I'm Jay. I run a compliance technology company. We actually started from legal. We wanted to change how lawyers work in large organizations. But then throughout the last few years, what we realized is that lawyers are very conservative, but compliance departments have been pushed more by regulators to change quicker and adopt technology. So we kind of pivoted from legal startup to compliance startup to a compliance tech company, which has been an interesting journey because I actually started from legal and compliance, my career. And the reason why I ended up in tech is because tech has been my passion. It's been my passion was when I was younger, when the internet was just starting. I was, in the late 90s, I was coding. I was trying to do some websites. And that's where I wanted to go. But after .com crash, my parents kind of nudged me towards a more traditional career. They said, why don't you keep your technology fascination as a hobby and then go and do something real? I was like, okay, well, what can I do? Law sounds interesting. So I went into law instead, but always kept an eye on technology and how it was changing the world. And ultimately combine the two.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because as you're saying that, I'm sitting here chuckling because I was the same way, right? I mean, we grow up as little boys and we were fascinated with certain things, right? And I was the same way. Commodore 64s, you remember those? That was like making the screen turn different colors and all that stuff. It was like, man, this is so cool, right? But then at some point, right, like you said, your parents were kind of like, hey, why don't you make that a hobby, right? It's kind of like the guys who start a band, and they're like, why don't you go get a real job, because you're not going to make any money doing that. And so you went towards the law. I became a CPA, right? Because those are classic professions, right? That's going to be able to earn money so you can live, right? But so you started off in law, and how did it kind of go from there? I mean, you started in law, but how did it kind of transform? Because I know, in just kind of looking at your background, that wasn't the only place that you stopped before you got to where you are now as the CEO of a tech company. So fill in a little bit. You get a job as a lawyer, and what ends up kind of happening at that point?
Yeah, so it was interesting. My first job was to work with a CFO of a large energy company. And it was supposed to be, typical after university, you go and you try to find a job. And then this was a 2-week job for me to help him sort out all of his papers, put it all in folders, nicely organized after an office move. So I ended up spending a lot of time working on legal documents and sorting them and, going through them, and actually creating a system to kind of file everything so he could find it. And then he offered me a job in the legal department, maybe because I knew too much about the company by that point.
Couldn't let you go.
Didn't let me go. But yeah, I joined the legal department immediately. I started looking at how we can streamline our work, how we can properly file and work with our contracts. Ultimately, I became the expert in negotiating these contracts with, these were like wholesale trading contracts for gas, electricity, commodities. Ended up working a lot on like contracts for derivatives and virtual power plants, which was a kind of invention which was pretty cool at the time. You can't store electricity as a power plant. You don't have big enough batteries, but on paper, you can invent a financial product which allows you to store electricity. So that was pretty cool. But very quickly ended up working quite a lot on the technology side, implementing a system to help us in our legal department. Being an IT support to the entire legal department as well, because I knew everything about computers and technology. So this was my early career. And then I joined Morgan Stanley, also there, kind of fixed income and commodities department, as the energy and commodities specialist. So working with traders on negotiating and signing these trading agreements to help them trade on commodities markets. But again, I had to scratch my itch. I found a lot of inefficiencies how we were doing things. So I kind of did some research internally on what systems we were using, and proposed to move to knowledge sharing or early signs of kind of corporate Wikipedia, to store all of our knowledge, not just legal knowledge, but compliance knowledge as well. Because I joined the bank in 2009, which was probably the
That's
wrong.
a good year to join a bank, right? No.
Some say yes, some say it's the wrong year to join a bank. The bonuses nosedived. But to me, it was interesting because it was a global bank and global regulators were implementing rules which were similar, different, and we had to manage all of that. So that's how, I ended up working on a lot of technology projects, trying to bring technology to a bank. Because to me, it was frustrating how we were doing things. To create any document when you have a lot of stakeholders in its content was a nightmare. It was, you create a document, you make some changes to it, you send it to 50 people, they all come back on email with their version of that document, and then trying to consolidate that and get approvals and record those approvals was difficult. So I started looking at how we can change that.
Yeah, so I'm starting to see some themes as we're kind of going through your career. I mean, it reminds me of, it's like a lot of times we're like, how did I get here? Right. But it's kind of like that Steve Jobs Stanford commencement speech where he's like, you'll never figure it out until you turn around and look backwards. And then all those random dots, right, in your life, then you can see where they line up. I mean, so I'm starting to see that already, right? I mean, kind of having the tech as a passion, right? And your first job was actually moving a bunch of papers around, putting them in files, right? I mean, I still remember those days of paper files and writing on files and, all of that kind of stuff. And then, but I'm hearing, things about streamlining the work, about how to file them better, still trying to scratch your itch from a technology perspective. And the one that I think is that everybody who's listening, you're going to see a tie-in on this in the future too, but kind of your frustration as somebody in that position, right? Of, look, how we're doing it, there's got to be a better way of doing it than this, right? I mean, that had to be going through your mind a lot, um, you know, during those times.
Yeah, absolutely. And one project which actually led me to thinking about this really seriously was we had a time in a bank when there were a couple of market events which we were told about, are going to happen. Like typical credit rating agency will downgrade your financial institution in credit rating. So,
I don't like to hear
sounds
that as a bank.
don't want to hear that as a bank, but every bank went through that in between 2009 and 2012. But to us, I was actually negotiating documents, agreements, which were governing billions of dollars of trades, and what we negotiated and put in those documents affected, how much money we had to pay following that credit rating downgrade. And we had regulators telling us, well, give us some answers. What is going to happen after that? What do you have in your documents? How much money are you going to have to own? And are you going to go down as Lehman did after that event? So, and we had over 100,000 documents to go through. And my thinking was, one, there must be a better way. Technology could read documents and understand them and, actually tell you. But actually what I found is that lawyers are a very creative bunch, and they love changing their clauses to the point where a machine cannot understand what the clause says. So
Yeah, I know.
so that led me to thinking about, well, actually, how do we create that content? We need to change how we work on content, on documents. In 21st century, we shouldn't be opening a Word document and creating a contract which governs billions of dollars of trades without any insight into what's been agreed as a final form of that document. So yeah, that's how really Clausematch started. I was thinking we need to know how we're creating that content. We need to know how it was approved. We need to know what's the final version of it. And then we need to have a structured way to see that data. So machine can understand it, apply artificial intelligence, and actually get some insights. So these were kind of the thoughts which were going through my mind at the time.
Well, and now that makes the name of the company, right? Duh, on why it is, because I can sit there and again, I can, having spent a lot of time in these areas, I can totally appreciate the mountain of work. You've got 100,000 documents to try to go through, and everybody, put their own little spin on it because everybody needs to have their opinion. And, I remember when I was younger in my career and I was getting my CPA license, I could never understand why, there were four tests you had to take, and one of them was just on law. And I'm thinking, I'm going to be an accountant. Why do I need all this legal training, right? until I've spent the rest of my career reading a whole bunch of legal documents, right? And yeah, I can only imagine how frustrating and hard that might be for some of the people in the legal or compliance space to have to go through and do this. And yeah, there's got to be a better way, right? So you've got this idea. So how does it kind of go from there, right? Because again, I mean, a lot of people out there, they see that things can be different. They want things to be different, but how do you actually make them different? How do you lots of people have great ideas, but not very many people actually speak up or say things or start a company, right, to try to fix that. So how did you go from that standpoint, where there are challenges and things like that that you were having to deal with to help you get to where you are now?
Yeah, it's I always thought that, ideas are actually, there are a lot of great ideas, but all ideas require execution. Um, and they require support, they require people being galvanized around the idea, because as a person who has the idea, you can't make it happen without other people involved. So I was never afraid to talk about ideas I had, and this was one of them. I went to my boss, I offered it to build it internally first,
So
but
this was still when you were at Morgan?
yeah.
Okay.
But then, we talked about it, and at the time, there was no strategy for any bank in the world to move to the cloud. And this required kind of cloud, people working in the cloud. So then I talked to other people, found a lot of support. And when people tell you, oh, this is a great idea, you actually get excited about it. And then you start thinking more about it. And then you kind of start making a plan in your head. And I guess my risk tolerance is pretty high. So I can take risks, always knowing that somehow it will work out. Obviously calculated risks, but yeah, I found a couple of people who were willing to help, one with startup capital and another person who was willing to kind of help me build the initial version. So that's how we started, really.
Well, I know that's an important point, because again, as people are listening, you're giving them little breadcrumbs along the way, so people gotta listen and pay attention. But I'll try to recap a little bit too, right? Where, like you said, when you come up with this great idea and you start sharing it with people, right? So you gotta get the idea out of your head and actually start sharing it with people, or the idea is never going to go anywhere. Because like you said, without execution, ideas really don't go anywhere, right? But you found some other people, because I think this is where it's important too. Anytime that people want to change the world, anytime people want to do something different, they have to find other people who can help them, right? Because we don't all have, the skill sets to be able to do everything together. And so you found some people with money. That's important when you're starting up, right? You
Yeah.
got to have people with money that can help to fund and support it. And in this case, you needed somebody with kind of the technical execution side of it. I mean, it sounds like you probably had some too, but you knew that you needed some help. You needed to bring in and work with and partner with other people in order to make this a reality, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people along the way are the most important part of your journey as a founder. Um, I think everyone who helps you, everyone who invests, every client, um, and every employee in a company counts and helps. Even negative experiences, they really bring a lot to your experience on how to deal with negative situations. And I'm always grateful when I'm going through a tough period, a tough patch, because looking back, I always understand, how it's helping me now.
Well, and that's the interesting thing too. Maybe we should talk about that for just a minute, because I think a lot of times, people with ideas or wanting to do things, they think everything's going to be, easy, right? Everything's just going to be easy. It's right. But there's challenges along the way, right? But like you said, we have those challenges for reasons. And we learn some things through some of those challenges, right? So, I mean, if you're comfortable sharing, were there, some of the different challenges that you dealt with, as you've gone through your journey as well, and kind of what you learned from them?
Yeah, absolutely. I tell the story of our challenges to our employees as well, so they know what we've gone through.
Yeah.
But obviously, I don't really share it that much in public. But some of the challenges that we met early on, one was we built a product, and then 2 years later, we went through a Techstars Barclays Accelerator, which was a startup program here in London, working with Barclays as a big bank. They provided a lot of support and resources to help us get the product off the ground. And we actually realized we need to rebuild the entire tech if we want to sell to banks. And if we want to sell to legal and compliance, then we also need to make it look different, because people are still attached to documents rather than data. So they need to see a document in front of them rather than, data. So we sat down and I said, well, we need to build something that looks like and works like Google Docs, but for enterprise, for compliance, for legal. And our engineers looked at me and they said, hey, you know what head of Google Docs once said? If you want a person to leave Google, put them on Google Docs project. That's how hard it is. Yeah, and I said, look, there is no other way, we have to do it. And we invested early in starting to work on that type of technology. So we're one of the few kind of enterprise companies offering real-time collaboration, which has been great. It's been a very unique selling point for us, especially in the enterprise world. But at the same time, it took a long time for us to build. So, another challenge, because you're building tech, which is hard to build, it takes a long time before you are delivering value to customers. And that means you need to continue raising money, until you have that first big client. And that's what I had to do. So for about 2-3 years, I was just raising money without, any revenue coming in. It's been tough. And then we actually signed Barclays as our first client. When I told everyone we're going to sign a big bank as our first client, everyone told me, you're crazy. You're a company of 6 people. You'll never sign a big bank. You'll never go through their process. And I said, no, we will. And it was quite a big change in company in our history when we signed that contract. It was a big 3-year contract. Actually, I have to give a lot of credit to the compliance CEO at Barclays, who completely believed in our ability to deliver, and I just could not deliver. So we put everything into that first client, and we signed them, and then we closed a big round of funding after that, which was, I guess, the culmination of all of the struggles that we had before, trying to build a very difficult tech and then trying to raise money without any revenue. But ultimately, we went through the Series A round. It was led by Index Ventures. We closed it, and then actually our PR person before we closed the round, she said, "Where would you like this to appear, the news?" And I said, "Hey, how about Forbes?" And she laughed. And then the next morning she called me and she said, "Hey, I've got an interview with Forbes." And I was like, "No way," which was crazy to me. But they printed, their headline was, "A banker turned entrepreneur went bankrupt, almost went bankrupt 5 times before raising a big round," something like that. So I was like, after all these struggles, we had this headline, but actually it resonated with a lot of people.
Well, and there's several things from what you just said there that I want to dig in more to, because I think they're fascinating, and they're things for people that do want to change the world to realize, right? Is that headline from Forbes. Let's just go there first, and then I want to come back and talk about Barclays again a little bit. But that headline, tech startup, almost goes bankrupt 5 times, right, before closing rounds of funding, right? And I know I worked a lot with startup companies earlier in my career as well, so I know what it's like to be a tech startup company, and the raising money and how hard it is. And I'm sure there were probably nights that you were like, man, I've got this dream, but we've only got burn rate, right? We've only got 7 more days of cash or whatever it is. And it's like, I remember talking to one CEO of a tech company, and he's like, we had the product, man, we just only had 30 days of burn rate, and we couldn't get it done within the 30 days, and nobody would give us any more money, right? That I'm sure there were probably some of those times where you were like, right? I mean, you feel like 1 step forward, 2 steps back. I mean, how do you keep fighting and pushing through when it feels like you're just getting slapped back, right?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think one thing which really helped me is at some point I decided that not that failure is not an option, but it's not an option for us to stop existing as a company, because the product is great. The need is there. We just need to get it into enough people's hands. And unfortunately, our early customers were very large financial institutions, and it's very hard to sell to them. So yeah, but to me, it was never an option. So because of that mindset, it's not an option because we have a product. I think somehow my mind, my brain adapted to, okay, we need to raise money. And I always found ways to raise money, even in the last minute. Literally a day when the last payroll comes in, the investment comes in. So this was our early life of a company sometimes. But I think because of that, it's actually funny, but my investors now say, hey, I don't know how you do it, but you've got this incredible ability to raise money no matter what happens on the market. And that stuck with me. And, I have this mindset that I just have to do it and find a way. And you always get someone on your journey, on your path, who's going to help out of nowhere somehow.
Well, and that's where, I mean, it sounds like obviously you have been very resourceful in being able to do it. And man, I feel you. It's like I'm an entrepreneur too, right? And it's like some weeks it's like, how am I going to make payroll? I'm past that now, but I mean, early on, that's kind of what you're feeling like, and it's like, and you're paying your employees and not paying yourself, and just trying to come up with or think about whatever you can just to make it work, because you've got this vision, it's going to be, and you just keep pushing forward, right? And it sounds like too, you've got some good manifestation, thoughts and feelings going on too, because it's like, telling your PR person, I want to be in Forbes. The next day, I got an interview for Forbes. It's like, all right, it's like, nope, we're gonna get it. We're gonna get a big bank as a customer, and sure enough, here comes the big bank, right? And I know, like you said, I mean, working with big banks, it sometimes takes years for them to do anything. I mean, even just the purchasing process can be 60, 90, 180 days. Yep, I want to buy what you have, and it still takes them that long to actually do it. But I think I want to go back to this a little bit, because like you said, there's always somebody that kind of shows up when you need them. And I know you made reference to that executive there at Barclays, but I want to tie into something that you said even earlier on, that it's about the people for you.
Yeah.
And I think so let's go there a little bit, because I think so much of the time, especially driven performance kind of people, we tend to be very task oriented and sometimes run over people, or don't have regard for their feelings. We don't worry about relationships with them. They're just a transaction to us to help us get to where we want to go. And I know you're not that kind of guy, right? Because I know some of your employees too, right? And how they talk about you, they might tell you to your face, but they love you, man. And it's but I wanted to go there because each time, what have you been doing, or how do you do that with people? Because like you said, somebody comes forward right when you need it, but it's not just a stranger completely out of the blue. I'm guessing it's somebody that you've had some interaction with over the time.
Yeah, I think I was trying to think what makes people actually like you, or not like you, but be open with you. And to me, it's all about gratitude. It's always being grateful for people in your life, even if you had negative experiences. It's always being grateful, and it's not even letting them know, but actually feeling that gratitude towards people who were on your way. I'm sure 90% of people don't even know that I'm grateful to them for something. But I always feel that gratitude towards people whom I've met and people who helped me. And I think it transpires ultimately through interactions, right? You don't need to tell them you're grateful, but they can feel it.
Well, they do feel it, right? And I think that, again, it's that gratitude is one of those ways of being that so many of us don't spend enough time doing, right? But again, I mean, when you're grateful for somebody, when you're grateful for something, it knows it feels it, and it wants to return that to you, right? There's the whole idea of reciprocity, and what people, they usually get it backwards. Sounds like you're doing it the right way, which is typically you have to give before you get, right? So you're helping, you're giving gratitude, you're expressing that, you're feeling that for these other people, and eventually that comes back to you, right? Because again, as you said, you went through the Barclays incubator. Wasn't a surprise to me when you said Barclays was your first client, right? Because I'm sure that you felt gratitude for being able to be in that incubator with Barclays, for the help that they had given to you, for your desire to make it work, right? Because I heard you say something like, it just has to work because of the people that have been helping, or along the way, I have to do it for them. And eventually that comes back to you, right? Barclays came in, that I'm sure that relationship that you had with some of those people there, they're like, that Jay is a cool guy. I like him. I like what he's doing. I feel good around him. right? Because it's not necessarily what you're saying, but it's how you're making people feel.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's like I said, I mean, just amazing. Now, so we talked a little bit about it from there too, but I want to kind of go another place too, because I think, I can tell that you have this, like you said, gratitude, but kind of caring for people as well. And you mentioned before, employees, customers, the people actually using your tool, other things like that, because I think so much of the time, especially out in the world, people see, we'll just say, people that run companies or rich and famous, and they're just doing it for the money, right? That a lot of times people see or think, oh, he started a business because he wants to become a millionaire, right? And so a lot of times people think it's just about the money. But I never heard you talk about money other than having to raise money as we've been going through this. So what is, I mean, I know what it is for me and what I've seen from other entrepreneurs and people that start businesses, but I want to kind of hear from you what's kind of the bigger reason why you're doing this, and what you're trying to really have as an impact in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would not be saying that, I'm not doing it also to some degree for money as well, because I think we all want financial independence. We want, to be successful and to have, not to have to worry, at least most of the time, about money, right? So I think, but I treat it more, but I can get money by working in a bank. I can earn money at a regular job. This is obviously bigger than money for me, is because I do feel that what we're building is going to make a difference, and is making a difference not just to people who are using our platform, but also to me. We gravitated more towards compliance and helping compliance departments. But to me, compliance is a field which is, can be looked at. Okay, they're this annoying department which is trying to tell us the rules that we can't do something, and it's slowing down the business. But actually thinking about it at a bigger perspective and bigger picture, bad things wouldn't have happened if we were thinking more seriously about compliance. And I'm not saying compliance, this is the rule, you absolutely have to follow it. It's more around, well, if we had this testing procedure for, these phone batteries, and every person who is testing these batteries is following the procedure, then maybe we would have less, less incidents with batteries catching fire. But that's what I'm trying to get to. When a financial product has been released to the market, if we were paying a little bit more consideration around the impact and how it impacts our end customers as a bank, then perhaps we wouldn't have mortgage-backed securities which are subprime, and we wouldn't have the financial crisis. What I mean is that compliance is around people understanding, certain rules and what they're supposed to do in order to make products safer for users in this world. And unfortunately, it's not because people don't want to make products safer. It's purely because it's very difficult to bring that compliance information to your employees and for them to know where to find it, and to understand that what they're doing is actually the right thing, and it will lead to safer products. So our mission is to make it so that people work in organizations in a safer way and bring safer products to the market, to which everyone will benefit.
Well, and that's It's interesting that you went there because I think it's, so much of the time, especially people who work in big organizations, that a lot of times we kind of forget we're like a big watch or a big piece of machinery with a whole bunch of little spokes and gears and other little stuff that's going on, right? And as long as everything is working right, everything's kind of going along, plodding along. But when something goes wrong anywhere in that machine, there can be some serious trouble, right? I mean, like you brought up the point about cell phone batteries, right? And I mean, yeah, there's been a whole bunch of new regulations and other stuff, about what you can take on airplanes and other things like that now, because there was kind of a compliance or quality, fall down, if you will, at a particular company, right? That their batteries for, well, we kind of figured out it was a design reason, I think was the main thing, but that was causing these batteries to overheat and then to catch on fire. And so the problem is, and it's trying to help people realize that the little piece that you do over here helps the whole thing.
Yep.
And if you don't, if you don't do your little piece over here, then the whole thing can go down, right? Or like you said, I mean, especially, post 2008 with a lot of the, the financial products and other stuff like that are out there. I mean, it put the world in a recession, right? And a
Yep.
lot of people lost a lot of money. A lot of people lost jobs. A lot of people lost their homes. That's the bigger kind of picture thing that I think you're talking about there, right? Is that by the work that you and your company are doing, you're able to help, hopefully, avoid or have fewer of those kind of things happen in the future. So there's less of that pain and less of, people losing money and other stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the hope. Um, and that's the mission. And we're well on our way. But yeah, absolutely. I think moving from reactive compliance to more proactive compliance is where kind of we're going as the world. And also, I think companies are changing very quickly now. We're looking at, we're seeing the ESG, environmental, social, and governance regulation. But actually, I think to some respects, ESG will help companies to hire better quality people, because actually people care about where they work and they care about environment and they want to work at ethical companies. So I think ultimately we're going towards the world where more and more companies will be more aware of how they operate and the impact that they're making in this world, because that's what people who work for them are asking for or are demanding.
Mhm. Yeah, because the people that are working for them, and also I think that the public now in general, more is kind of looking to that. People want to do business with certain kinds of companies that they agree with and maybe have their same values and other stuff like that.
Yep.
And so it's becoming a bigger and bigger deal that way. And so, yeah, I mean, kind of what you're doing is just trying to help, the overall economy, the overall world as well. But let's talk about, because I think there's some other groups of people too, right? Because there's the people who are using your product, right? And I mean, I know I've worked with a lot of people in audit, risk management, compliance over the years, and it's a tough job, and they're overworked, and there's a lot of manual work that they're still doing. There's a lot of stuff from a technology perspective that's just hard for them to do. And so, again, I heard that as you were kind of talking about and coming up with what the idea was going to be is, you're also helping them, right? Because anything you can do, I'm guessing, to make somebody's life at work a little less stressful, a little
Yeah.
easier, also translates into those other people's personal lives as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the story by one of our users. And it was a credit officer in one of the banks, and he owns a global credit policy. It sets the rules of how credit department operates, and how they, what their risk tolerances are when giving credit to different, different organizations and people. So every change to that document, to that policy, involves 150 people having to provide input, comments, changes, and then ultimately approvals. So it used to take him 6 months to update, a simple paragraph in that document because of all of that input. So that's how complex it can get. So, he came straight back to us and said, hey, my life is just 1,000 times easier now because I can do this in real time and everyone is looking at the same version, and I can see and check, who changed every single paragraph in this document and, what their comments were, and ultimately record approvals. So, it sounds simple, but actually in a large organization to organize that type of workflow is very difficult, it's complex. Yeah, so that was a pretty simple example of how it changes people who are actually doing the work,
Yeah.
and changes their work.
Well, and I think too, it's the other group is kind of your employees, right? Because we were talking, you mentioned ESG, and having companies that are doing something that's different, that are trying to change the world, are the kind of places that a lot of people really want to work as well. And so, I know that I again, with a lot of the executives, business owners, and other people that I worked with over the years, like you mentioned, and again, we'll be honest, right? I mean, you don't start a business to lose money. I mean, you want to make some money. You need to be financially secure, and and you are hoping for and looking for that. But so much of what I have seen too is the desire and the bigger goal too of being able to have a place that is safe and can provide for your employees. Right.
Absolutely.
And it's like, I see this a lot of times too, when you've got people that have grown their business and maybe they're looking for a liquidation event, and some of them won't do it because they're like, I know what this other company is going to do. They're going to come in, they're going to rape, rob, and pillage my company. They're going to treat my employees, who I love, like garbage, just to try to save a buck and make a little bit more money. That a lot of times it kind of becomes almost like this stewardship for your employees as well, right? Having a place where they enjoy coming to work, where they get paid a fair wage, where they're actually listened to and appreciated. And I'm going to use a word that you used. I'm sure you feel pretty grateful for your employees, because we've used that word several times, right?
Absolutely.
And that, I'm guessing that gives you some satisfaction as well, right? There's a lot of intangibles that you get besides the money. And is that one of them?
It's absolutely one of them. And my probably early proud moment was when we had employees, working for Clausematch, for our company, getting mortgages and buying flats, and being able to start their, the what it's called, the house ownership ladder, with our company. To me, it was the impact of us employing our people is that they're able to grow in their life, in their personal life, and we're enabling that and helping that. So to me, it was the fact that I've created something that helps people who work for us, work with us in their personal life. That was a great moment for me, just realizing that we're enabling that.
Well, that's why I like you, man, because you got like the whole package going on, with understanding, and being responsible with, what you're doing, the people that you're helping, how you're helping the world, how you're able to impact people's lives positively, even down to your employees, right? Because I know one of the reasons why ESG has come up is because so many companies just treat their employees like garbage. They don't pay them a fair wage. They don't listen to them. They overwork them. And a lot of that, stress, the authoritarian, effectively a lot of people in corporations act kind of like bullies to get their employees to do stuff. And the problem is, I used to get bullied on the playground, right, as a little kid. And so I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like in the corporate world too. And it's hard. We always like to think that work and our personal life are separate, completely separate, but it's not, right? If you're getting bullied at work, if you're not feeling appreciated at work, it flows over into the rest of your life, right? And it affects the other relationships. But on the flip side, when you've got, business owners and companies like you that are grateful for their employees, right? They're rooting for them. They're helping them in their personal life to be able to buy a flat or get a home and, do stuff so that the work that they're doing is able to provide financially, but also having a better work environment relates to a better personal environment too. So I'm grateful for you for doing that for your employees and for helping, all the people in, like you said, some of these spaces like compliance. A lot of people don't really appreciate them, don't really understand how they really do help and make all of us safe. Safer way, safer products, was one of the things that I heard you say there. So this is great. I just love talking stuff like this. So
Thank you.
well, is there anything else you'd like to share here too, before we wrap up and let everybody get back to their day? But
no, I just wanted to say this was great. I probably haven't shared some of the things I've shared today before, so this was really great to actually, for me, even just remembering and talking about it, and remembering how many great moments we went through as a company in our early life, and how much we've gone through and how much we've achieved. So personally, for me, this was great, and thank you, Jason, for having me.
well, you're welcome. Thank you. And I know it's because that reminds me too, because just what you said right there, I have to remind myself of that too, right? As a lot of times, especially as performance driven people that we're trying to do stuff, we don't probably spend enough time just kind of stopping and turning around and looking back and remembering and being grateful for all of the things that got us to that point, the good and the bad, right, that you bring up, because a lot of times we only want to focus on those good things or only remember those good things, but a lot of those challenges that we had, right, make us who we are today. If I could go back and rewind and do some things different in my life, yeah, I might be tempted to want to do that, right? But if I were to change some of those challenging times, I wouldn't be the same person I am today, because I had to go through those things in order to be who I am today, right? And so thanks for for bringing that up too. I need to
Yeah,
spend a few
absolutely.
minutes doing that today too.
And I think it also drives performance. Performance is not all about setting goals and being ruthless in, working people much harder to execute them. Because I think when people work in a company where you've got a great culture, people generally are higher performers because they want to give back to the company. And that's what I found is, of course, we have goals and key objectives and key results, and we track them, but it's not to a point where we're being ruthless with them. It's more around performance by empowering people to achieve those objectives.
Yep. Another thing that's near and dear to my heart, right, is you don't have to be ruthless to be successful and have performance, right? Or one of the things that I say sometimes, you don't have to be an asshole to be a good leader, right? Because again, that sometimes people just think that that's how they have to be in order to be successful. And so another reason why I loved having you on here today, Jay, because you're proof that you don't have to be that way and you can still be successful, right? And so just love the energy that you brought and what you're doing. I love your company and what you guys are doing to help people as well. So it was a great honor for me to actually be able to talk to you today. So thank you for that as well.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.